Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the St. Louis podcast. I'm your glorious host today, Eric Brown, president of iMedia and partner at Mogul Holdings. Today, we are joined by the one and only Aaron Bockman, chartered financial consultant at Synergy Wealth Solution, specializing in cash flow management, strategies for managing retirement income and expenses, investment planning, including private credit and private debt investing, legacy and business succession plans, strategies for managing financial risk, including life insurance, long-term care, and annuities. Also, president of the National Human Resources Organization and two-time firm MVP. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Past president.
Retired president.
Yes.
So, first things first, did you start at Northwestern Mutual?
No, I did not. I did not start at Northwestern Mutual.
The reason I asked that is pretty much everyone I know that got into the financial space that's my age, around like say 28 to like 32, almost every single one of them started at Northwestern Mutual. So let me ask you, why?
Why do people start there?
Yeah.
Their model is such that what they do is they hire a lot of individuals, and usually what happens is they might be college interns, and they'll say, they might have a list, say, provide us a list of your closest friends.
Yeah.
We'll call those individuals, and a lot of people get turned off by that. But here's the thing: is you're starting a business,
Mm-hmm.
and that Northwestern Mutual model, just like, for example, New York Life or Mass Mutual or Prudential, even and Edward Jones, all of those have different varying degrees of how you would start. So, for example, if you were to start at Jones, a popular way that you would start is they might say, you come in and we'll give you a book of business, but you have all these metrics you have to hit. Like, so for
Sure.
example, like you have to knock on so many doors, you have to talk to so many people. And if you don't do that, you're out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at a place like Northwestern Mutual or Prudential or New York Life or Mass Mutual, any of those insurance-based companies, usually what happens is they will, in the long term, allow the person the most freedom. They also provide limited structure. And so what I mean by limited structure is they say, look, you're going to sink or swim on your own. We're going to give you what we like to refer to as the coach, cop, consultant. So at the very, very beginning, they're going to be the cop.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to say, you've got to be here at this time and do this stuff. And then after that, they're going to coach you. And then they're going to be the consultant. So for example, I've been doing this, like you said, just under 25 years. And the reality is very few people tell me what to do. They know that I know what I'm supposed to do. I show up when I show up. I leave when I leave. Nobody asks me what to do because I am a business owner. And in that Northwestern Mutual model lends itself to that. Whereas if you were to go to like a bank, and let's just use some of your regional banks like a PNC or
Sure.
a Commerce or anything along those lines. So traditionally, the way that those would work is they might give you a salary. Let's say they were to give you, and I'm making this up admittedly, they might say something like, hey, we'll pay you $50,000 or $60,000. If you hit all of these metrics, we will then pay you more. But because they're providing you with quote unquote unlimited people to talk to, like, hey, Mr. Johnson has a CD that's coming due here soon. Go talk to Mr. Johnson. Whereas if you were to start going back to Northwestern Mutual, when you walk in day one, they don't go, Mr. Johnson has a CD coming due. So the fail rate there is going to be higher, and the people at the very end of the pendulum who are successful, they're very successful. So whereas at a regional bank, the success rate will be higher, but the people who are there are less entrepreneurial.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. I find it interesting because when we started the marketing agency, it's kind of the same thing, right? I had a couple years out of college doing sales, but you're new to the business, and who are you going to sell? The
Mhm.
people your age don't have any money.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I was getting called by Northwestern Mutual or anyone that I graduated with that got into finance. I'm like, well, there's no money to manage.
Right.
What do you want me to? I'll throw you $10 a month. Where are you going to put that in? Put in an index fund or something. But I'm like, so I always found that
in
as
50 years.
I always found that as like the hardest thing when you're first starting out, especially with what you do, is trying to call people that are 21 years old, I mean, I would say 9 out of 10 of them don't have any money to invest. And then that 10th person, you have to hit 100 of those 10 people to get one person to be like, "Yes."
Yeah, it in any type of sales profession or any business,
Mhm.
it's a numbers game.
Yep.
You see enough people, you should have success. And one of the things that I would say that was different about my start is that when I started, I was actually in a program that was with a company called John Hancock.
Mhm.
We had a program called Long Term Care Fast Start. And so this way that it worked is I literally cold called 200 to 300 people a day,
Mhm. Yep.
talking to them about long term care in the hopes that they wouldn't hang up on me or cuss me out and then hang up on me, which I had plenty of those happen. And
Yeah,
then
love it.
you would then go to their home, you would talk to them about long term care insurance, and you would simply say, uh, if you think I've done a good job, is there somebody else that you could refer me to? And that was ultimately the goal because it was much easier to get a referral
Yes.
than cold calling people. But that was absolutely brutal.
Was it at least a good product?
Oh, absolutely.
So where does long-term care come into play? Because I always thought I asked a couple of my older relatives recently, and they're all like, "It's expensive as hell. It's
Absolutely, it
insanely
is.
expensive."
Yes. So what happened was the story that I heard. So there was
Mhm.
a guy here who's a kind of a local legend in the long term care space. He knows more than I've forgotten. He's forgotten more than I know, rather.
Sure, yeah.
And so it'd be weird if it was the other part, right? So, so his name was Michael, and so Michael said that what happened was there was a company called GE Capital,
Mm,
and GE in the early '90s or late '80s, somewhere around that, said, "Hey, we're gonna have a problem with people paying for long-term care insurance. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an insurance product." And the issue ended up being was that they said, "Well, we need to have something that protects against inflation because every year it gets more and more and more and more expensive." And so how do you hedge traditionally against inflation? Well, if you're an insurance company, you're buying US Treasuries. Now think about that in the late '80s, early '90s, you might have got somewhere between, in the late '80s, double digit returns, and in the early '90s, it might have been high single digits. But if you're getting a US Treasury at 9% per se, and you're saying we're going to have inflation or your coverage is going to go by 5%, well, there's still a 4% spread there. Well, what happened, Mr. Brown, from 1982 to the year 2020 in US Treasuries?
well, spread got smaller.
Got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and
Mhm.
smaller. And so what ended up happening was that insurance companies were like, "Oh no, we're promising you 5% and we're getting 2. We're losing 3% every single year." So what happened? They had to go back to the state commissioners and raise premium and raise premium and raise premium. And so often I'll tell clients, I'll say, "Look, there's 3 different ways that you can pay for this, for long-term care. Number 1, you can do nothing.
Yeah.
Number 2, you could have long-term care insurance, which is pretty expensive, but if you needed long-term care, you would want long-term care insurance. Problem is you don't know that you'll need it."
Yeah.
Or the third one is a hybrid between life insurance and long-term care. And I'm kind of partial to that one just simply because here's one thing I know about you. If I know anything, I know you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And so if
Jessica says it every week. If
so
there's one fact in life, it's death.
correct. Correct. So is it good? Yes. Is it expensive? Yes.
Yeah, I always found long-term care interesting. So I was like, it's because the amount of money that has to be dumped into end of life is insane.
It's huge. I've seen studies that say, and this is literally, I'm pulling this from the recesses of my brain, but it
Mhm.
was something like end of life care, uh, is like hundreds of thousands of dollars, $350,000 over X amount of years. I can't remember what it was, but it certainly is something that can wipe people out. But those are crazy times when I was there at at Hancock starting that. Uh, if I had to do it all over again, I guess I would. But it certainly was really hard.
Yeah. Did you see that, I don't pay attention I try not to pay attention to politics, especially right now, but I saw that,
Is there something going
um
on right now?
I saw that so I found it interesting because we were just talking about, like, just prices, that apparently, if if half the obese people in the United States, if Medicare and Medicaid and these things were to cover semaglutide,
Mhm.
it would cost trillions of dollars. It would be like 4 times the cost of all prescription drugs right now. And it's slowly being done
Mhm.
that we're paying. So I
The
just saw
question
that.
is, and I don't know the answer, maybe you do,
Yeah.
somebody knows the answer. The question is if somebody weighs 400 pounds,
Yeah.
we all know somebody who weighs 400 pounds.
Yeah.
If that person has a shot or a pill,
Mhm.
something that's paid for by the government
Yeah.
that will get them down to 200 pounds.
Sure.
The question is,
Will that outweigh the costs?
correct. And I don't know
Doesn't
because
seem like it will, because the problem is it's $1,400 a month.
yeah, that's I mean, you isn't
And
that but that's what you spend
in
on your
Germany
suits, right? Each month?
Germany, f that's fairly maybe a little bit less, depending on if I'm getting a good deal or not, but yeah, but I don't spend it monthly.
You know where there's a
And if I
great
did, I'd have a lot more suits.
so last year
Mhm,
at Black Friday,
mhm.
um, there was a company, at, Plaza Frontenac, which I usually don't frequent there, but my family every single year, we go to Plaza Frontenac to go to, see Santa Claus.
Yeah.
You can make an appointment, it's easy, in, out, done.
An appointment?
You can make an appointment to go see Santa Claus.
Really?
Yes. So
Interesting,
we all
okay.
get dressed up. This is our card that we
Yeah.
send to everybody for the holidays. So we go see Santa Claus, and I said to my wife, I was like, "Hey, it's Black Friday, and we're in a
So
very upscale mall,
you went to
Plaza Frontenac,
see
Santa on
Santa
Black
on
Friday."
Black Friday.
Yes, yes, yes.
Was there a
And
deal for the Santa is there a Santa
no,
Claus
no, it just
special?
happened to be. I
That's
said,
so
"Hey,"
early.
I was like, "We're gonna be home.
Yeah.
Let's just get it done."
Yeah, that's fair.
And so, um, because that mall is kind of an upscale mall,
Yeah.
it wasn't really that packed.
Mhm.
And so I said, "Hey,
It's
this,"
never busy in there.
I said,
Anytime I'm in there.
this place isn't very packed. Let's just walk around." And I went to this suit store. If you want me to tell you the name, I will. But
What's the suit store?
it was called Indochino.
Oh god.
And so,
I know Indochino.
do you?
Yeah.
Well, I ended up getting a custom made suit for $370.
Interesting. But they're kinda trash, I always thought. That's what I've heard.
I've got 2 of them.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
That's
thought it was
cheap.
great. Yeah, I thought it was pretty reasonable for a suit.
That's
So
not even reasonable. That's cheap.
yes,
That's like you can't even get like a good quality suit without being you can't even find that like direct online.
no, I mean,
Is it wool? Is it actually good material?
yeah, good. I'll bring you one. I'll show it to you.
Well, yeah, wear it to B&I. Let me know when you have it on. All right, so we had a few things that I know we wanted to talk about. So when you started your business, I'm curious. So you started with that. Eventually, obviously, you moved into different things,
Correct.
being able to sell more products to people, more higher end people, of course, and more families and things like that. So how did you go from at John Hancock doing long-term care to what you do now?
So it's a little. I'll just try to hit the high points because it's
Yep.
kind of a long story. But
Yep.
the the thing is that when you're starting, typically you'll start with like an insurance license or a securities license. So, for example, if you went to Wells Fargo or something along those lines, you're going to start with a securities license, and then you'll get an insurance license. Or if you start at, as you said, Northwestern Mutual, you'll probably start with an insurance license, and then you'll get a securities license. So they're usually reversed depending upon the company. And so for me, I started with my insurance license, and then I ended up getting my securities license. And that allowed me to talk to my clients more about investing and insurance than just insurance. And so the reality is that the success rate in my business over a 5-year period, I've seen and heard numbers that say it's like 1%.
Really?
Yeah. So you have a 1% chance that you're going to be successful. And part of that reason is because think about this. You have to be ninja level at handling rejection.
Yeah.
Some of us are better than others, because we were rejected as kids. So anyway, but
I'm
but
used to it.
so what happened is that uh, it takes a while, and I think my very first year. So this is how I got in. There was a lady. I was working at a restaurant called Turvey's on the Green in the Central West End. She called me over and she says, "Hey, are you always, that down?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm pretty loud and funny and boisterous." And she says, "Well, come work for me." And she throws down this card and says, "John Hancock." She starts talking about products and services. And I think like 21 years old. And I go, "Product." I was like, I put product in my hair.
Mhm.
And she's like, "Okay, a service. Like, what kind of services are we talking about?" My granddad was in the service. I was like, "What are we talking about?" And she starts talking all of this crazy stuff that I'd never even heard of before. And she says, $50,000 your first year. And I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's go back to that part. And are you saying that's what I can make?" She's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Okay.
Sure, sure.
Right. So I come in and they're like, "We're going to give you two tests. One is going to see how well you are, how good are you at talking to people. And then in addition
How'd
to,
they
it
run that test?
was like a personality test of some sort. And
Oh,
then
so
they,
okay. So just
right,
just a personality test. Got it.
correct. And then
So it
this,
wasn't like you sat down with someone and they like questioned you.
well, they did that too.
Yeah.
But the second one was, "What do you know?" And so this guy comes into the room and he's like, "Well, Aaron, we've got the two results. This one right here says you don't know anything." And I was like, "I told you that. I told you I don't know anything." And they said, "But this one right here says that you can talk to anybody." And I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, I told you that too." I was like, "I don't care if you're a billionaire or if you're a heroin addict." I was like, "We're all gonna die."
Mm.
I remember specifically, he's like, "Well, that's true." I was like, "So I don't care. Of course I'll talk to anybody." And so at the time, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I was going to school in my brain. I was starting out at community college. And then what I was going to do was I was going to just transfer to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln's architectural program. Cause of course,
Sure.
they wouldn't want,
That adds up. Yeah.
who wouldn't want me, right? And so, cause I didn't know anything. I just thought you could just transfer in. And so I'm getting all of my prerequisites out of the way so that I can be an architect. I'm going to drawing, getting math, doing all these different things. They then tell me, "Hey, you can have this job." And I was like, "Well, I don't have my degree yet. I'm in the process." And they're like, "It doesn't matter." And they said, "We'll teach you everything." And I was like, "Okay." Side note, which is really, really, really interesting. Up until recently, there haven't really been degree programs for financial planning. There's a degree in finance. That's not the same thing. And I've
Yeah.
always told people a really good degree would be a degree in psychology because that's how you would deal with individuals, and that's actually better than a degree in finance because it's really built on personal relationships and
I
empathy.
found psychology and sociology super interesting in college.
Absolutely.
So good.
So you learn about the Skinner box and all that stuff, and
Yep.
yeah, that was intro to psychology.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but so of
Pavlov's dog or
course,
Pavlov's whistle.
well, yeah, he had a whistle and then he had the dog,
Yeah,
so
so it's
or
both.
bell.
That's
He would
that's
ring
right.
the bell and then the
Yeah,
dog would salivate.
that's right.
So, um, so I started there doing this 250, 300 phone calls a day. And then around year 5, year 6, it starts to click and I'm actually being able to
So you
just,
didn't get that many pickups on 250 dials then?
the goal was to actually have 4
Conversation.
legitimate
Yeah.
conversations that would last, like you could say this was a
So for
meaningful
people
conversation.
listening, 4 conversations and 300 phone calls. And people don't like cold
200,
calling.
200
Yeah,
was the
sure.
number. Yeah.
People don't like cold calling now.
No.
I how I started the business was cold calling and networking. Those are the only ways. My friends and family know, shout out to all of you. They didn't help when I first started the business, but how are they going to?
Right.
Why are they my son just started a marketing company, you should use them. It's like, that's a tough ask.
It is very,
That's a
very.
that's a very tough ask. So I get it. But literally I had to start by cold calling. And it wasn't even that the first year or 2 isn't that bad. It's really if you're sitting in like year 5, still
Still, oh, it's brutal. So
I
I did
couldn't do it
that.
for 5
I
years.
did it for 3.
I did it for about 3. Yeah, like every day.
It yeah, it wears on you.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah.
remember specifically, and this will come in later, Eric, in our story here, but I remember just thinking, I was like, if somebody would just offer me a job for $30,000 a year, I'll quit. I'll quit. And because it was so, I mean, I must have quit 1,000 times
Mm.
because it was so, so hard. But what ended up happening was around year 5, year 6, I started to make a reasonable amount of money. I was able to support my wife and I had been married by that time, and she actually helped support us in the very, very beginning. You have to have somebody to lean on, and it didn't hurt that I was the manager of an apartment building in Clayton for my reward, if you will, was that I had
Which
$200 a month rent. So
that's pretty nice.
it was very nice. So I
How
did
much was the How much would the apartment have gone for back then?
$700 a month.
Yeah.
So
Wait, saying that out loud is insane because
oh yeah, because now that same apartment's probably $2,500 a month.
minimum.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know how some of these apartment prices and things are out of control. Well,
Yes.
so is home prices right now, but
There's a whole we could do 10 minutes of one off on
St. Louis
home
County's
prices.
crazy. This person just bought the house right next to my parents' house.
Mhm.
My parents have been there since the subdivision started, like 92. And, I think they probably bought it for like whatever, 100 grand,
Mhm.
110,000. The neighbor just sold it. Neighbor died. Family sold it around $500,000.
Mhm.
Unfinished basement. And it's, 3-bed, 2-bath upstairs, a decent sized house. Say 1,800 square
And where
feet.
did you say this is?
Wildwood.
Okay.
Lake Chesterfield.
Okay.
Five
Do you
hundred
remember when
thousand
that
ounces.
drained?
Yes.
I think it's
Every
drained like 3 times,
Yeah,
hasn't it?
absolutely. I think there's water in it right now, but yeah. Yeah. And those people that live around it had to fork out thousands of dollars. Like all those condos on that side.
Right. The HOA fees for some of those you've seen HOA fees in Clayton, sometimes they're $1,000 a month.
Right.
And those
that's
ones that are in the Central West End, those big mansions,
Mhm.
your HOA fee might be $50,000-$60,000 a year.
It's crazy.
So,
Well, I do so since we deal with a lot of home service companies, I've been talking to like property managers and things like that. And they tell me 90% of the condo buildings in St. Louis do not rent them because eventually they're all behind on their debt. So eventually it's going to come due. There's undue maintenance that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they got 50 grand saved up. So guess who's going to have to pay for that? All of the tenants.
it's really interesting that you say is what are we going to do? And it's an interesting ask. Is the AT&T building downtown?
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who's a politician
Mm.
on a state level, and he says to me, he says, "Aaron, I've got a great idea," and I was like, "Let's hear it." And he says, "What I want to
There's no
do,
parking for that building.
that's a problem."
Yeah.
He says, "What I want to do is I want to give somebody $50 million in tax credits for that building." And I was like, "That's going to be a hard sell. Tell me how you're going to get that done."
Yeah.
And so he says, "Well," he says, "here's how this is going to go. If that building doesn't sell and it stays in its condition now, what will eventually have to happen to it, Aaron?
Tear it down.
Got to tear it down."
Yep.
And he says, "And what do you think the cost of tearing down a building that much or that tall?" And I said, "Let me guess, $50 million?" And he said, and he goes, "So the way that I look at it, we either pay for it now or we pay for it later." And when you put it that way,
Yeah.
and that's also another thing that's
But
really,
what are they gonna do with who's gonna tenant it out? Who's gonna rent the space?
well, the dream is to have it be a mixed use space, right?
Good luck.
I
I thought the whole thing of converting commercial to residential
It's difficult.
it's not only difficult,
Mhm.
the units usually look like shit afterwards because it's
Now, wait,
not
to be clear, did you say eunuch or unit?
units.
Okay, we'll just make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Because like I just saw a big old church that got converted
Yeah. Mhm.
into like 18 lofts or something here in St. Louis. And there's literally, the kitchen setup. And then imagine that camera right there. There's a pole right there,
Mhm.
massive pole right in front of like the sink. And I'm like,
Who wants that?
no one designed the space for people to live in. It's designed for people to work in.
Correct.
And how much would it be to convert that thing into rent? Who wants to live? I wouldn't want to live at the top of one of those. I don't know about you.
Really?
No.
Dude.
I'm scared of heights.
I think it'd be awesome to live like on the 40th floor.
I'll go visit.
Yeah.
I like a rooftop terrace, but I don't
Right.
want to live up top.
I would totally live up top.
It makes me scared. If like there's a fire or something, you got to go all the way down the stairs.
That's true.
Like if you're up high, you got to almost have like a parachute to be able to jump out the window.
Yeah. So,
You don't want to
but
be
yeah, but I mean, look at New York City.
Yeah.
How many office building fires are there?
I don't know.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. None that I hear of.
No,
It only
no.
takes one though.
It only takes one.
Hey there, St. Louis podcast listeners. We've got some exciting news from our friends over at Farmers Insurance of St. Louis, led by the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Lee of Farmers Insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for a job or to own your own business under a brand that everyone and their cousin is familiar with, Mark Lee with Farmers Insurance of St. Louis is recruiting insurance agency owners here in St. Louis for their Farmers Insurance Mentorship Program.
And as many of you are aware, Garrett and I have owned quite a few successful and award-winning businesses over the years. And in a past life, one of those was a farmer's insurance agency out of Chesterfield, Missouri.
Eric and I know firsthand how hard it is to start a business under a brand that no one has heard of and convince consumers and businesses to trust that you're an authority figure in your industry.
And as many of you know, we own an award-winning marketing firm, Vi Media, the one that Garrett was just discussing. And building that company's reputation literally took years. We're still building it to this day, and it's been 8 years in the making. However, with the Trusted Farmers Insurance Agency name on the building, we got started when we started our Farmers Insurance Agency. The trust was already built and has been for 96 years.
And if you can't do math, that means Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928. Luckily, you don't need to be a human calculator to get rich as an owner of your very own Farmers Insurance Agency.
Nope. All you have to do is reach out to the one and only Mark Lee, the leader of Farmers Insurance in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area.
That's right. So ensure he continues to sponsor our show and your favorite podcast, the St. Louis Podcast, by quitting your job today and calling Mark Lee. I wouldn't even wait for him to answer your call. Call your boss now, quit, and become your very own business owner.
Mm-hmm. Visit insurancecareerstl.com. That is insurancecareerstl.com. Should we spell it out?
Yes. It would
INSURANCE, career, CAREER, STL.com, insurancecareerstl.com. Go there now. Back to the podcast.
And wait, insurancecareerstl.com.
Back to the podcast. All right. So financial advisors, financial planners.
Yes.
What's the difference? And I mean, why would anyone realistically, once you finish this question, finish your answer, why would anyone want to work with an advisor when there's planners?
Good question. So here's the difference. So if you were to walk into just your standard, and let's just use Edward Jones, for example, and I'm using them because they're the biggest name in town. Typically, the experience is going to go something like this. You're going to walk into an office. You're going to talk about investing. You remember their slogan, "We make sense of
Investing.
investing." So they're telling you right off, they're an investment shop.
Mm.
So typically speaking, your experience is going to be, they're going to do what's called a fact finder, where they're going to find out as much as they can about you financially. And then they're going to make a recommendation based on investments. And you're going to see a pie chart. They're going to talk about asset allocation and diversification. And they're going to say, if you put so much money in stocks and so much money in bonds, X amount of money over Y amount of time, and you get Z amount of return, here's the statistical probability that you won't outlive your money. There's nothing wrong with that. And what they're telling you is that by and large, that's their lane. That's what they do.
Sure.
They're not, we'll bring it back to the beginning, they're not Northwestern Mutual. They're not, Edward Jones isn't known for selling insurance. Can you get insurance from an Edward Jones person? Well, of course you can. But again, their lane typically is investing. So they're gathering those assets, they're managing those relationships. Financial planning, I think, is best. The best way I've ever been able to describe it is a story that I had, conversation I had with my dad like 5-6 years ago. And my dad was sitting in the back room of my house. And I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I can tell you that you don't care about the rate of return on your investments. And he looks at me like, what? And I said, no, I can prove it. And he rolls his eyes really big and he goes, prove it. And I said, let's pretend that I was the best money manager that you ever met. And without fail, we beat the S&P 500 every single year. But when you got to retirement, you didn't have enough money to retire. Would you care that we beat the market? And he says, no. And I said, no, let's flip it. Let's pretend that every single year without fail, we underperformed the market by 3%. But this time, when you got to 65, when you said you wanted to retire, all the boxes were checked. Everything you said you wanted to have accounted for had been accounted for. Would you bring me your statement back in hand and say, why didn't we beat the market? And he said, well, like he thought about it for, I think it was like a half a second. He goes, well, not if I got what I wanted. And I said, see, you're misled, and my profession, quite frankly, is misled. You're told that my job is to beat something that does this every single day.
Right.
And I said, the reality is the goal is the goal, not this. So the best question is, what do you want? And furthermore, I can prove to you that you don't even want $5 million. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Oh, okay. Why don't I want $5 million? I said, because what you actually want is what $5 million gets you. And he said, yeah. And I said, so again, what do you want? And so planning typically continues on and encompasses investing, but you might, for example, work with the client to make sure they have a will and they have a trust. Now, do we write wills and trusts? No. Do we write powers of attorney? No. But we'll sit in those meetings and set them up, help them set them up with an attorney and say, here's some of the things that we might want to talk about. And we actually have a trust department that can actually review all of those legal documents and say, hey, have you thought about adding this? Or, oh, we don't really like the language here. Same thing with taxes. I can't give you tax advice, but it's kind of like one of those tongue-in-cheek things where I go, I can't really tell you that this is, but you need to talk to your accountant. Here's the reality. I can't practice tax. I do know more than the average bear about it. And I'll say to a client, hey, it's my understanding that this, and this, but I'm going to underscore that with a caveat that we need to work with your accountant to make sure that everything that I'm telling you is correct. So we're going to talk to somebody about taxation. We're going to talk about wills, trusts, powers of attorney. We're also going to set up somebody's own personalized website so they can see everything, how it works together. So, for example, how does their 401k work with their IRA? What if they're a business owner? What does the sale of their business have to do with this? So, for example, I'm working with somebody right now, and my advice to them from a taxation standpoint, I said, look, we're going to need to talk to your accountant, but here's an idea that we need to bring to your accountant is, what if we were to sell 1/3 of your business on December the 31st, 1/3 on January the 1st, and 1/3 on January the 1st. So that way, in less than 370 days, you've gotten completely paid, but you spread that taxation out over 3 years. That's planning. In addition to that, typically speaking, advising is going to cover one, maybe two different topics. So you might talk about investments and insurance. And I'm both an advisor and a planner. Not every single client that works with me is a planning client because not everybody needs to sit down and have a quarterly meeting. And then usually in the fourth quarter, usually November, October is very popular. I'll read somebody's benefits guide for them and say, well, Mr. Johnson, this is what your benefits say over here. Mrs. Johnson, this is what your benefits say over here. Here's how you could mix and match these. Should you have, plan A over here and then plan B over here? Or should you have an HSA? And we'll look at all of those. And then we have the ability to model what the long-term tax consequences are by any of those moves using our but planning software. So that's kind of a brief overview of the difference between planning and advising.
Instead of just selling stocks and bonds.
Correct.
Or life insurance.
Correct.
So I'm curious, with 401ks, things like that, it seems like they are becoming less and less used. The sentiment is becoming just less and less useful. I want to invest my own money how I want to invest it, not through a 401k. It seems like obviously where it would make sense if it's your company matches, right?
100%.
But if your company's not putting any money in, what's the point of having that? What's the point of having, obviously Roth, I guess there's situations for that make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand, why wouldn't I just put a majority of my money in, VOO and things like that, and just let it sit?
For all of those at home, VOO or VOO, as Mr. Brown has called it, is the S&P 500 from Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the most popular one is SPY.
Yep, SPY. Yeah.
S&P 500. So the answer why you wouldn't do that, well, first, it would also depend upon if you're asking like, why wouldn't I just put all my money in the S&P 500? That's one question.
Sure.
Here's the answer to that. Well, it depends how old you are, depends how risky you are, depends what you want. So, for an example, traditionally speaking, a mix of both stocks and bonds, and then maybe you add in some alternatives like real estate, or what's becoming more popular now is private equity and private credit. You have to meet certain qualifications for those things, but you also have large companies, medium-sized companies, small companies, and traditionally speaking, you get lower volatility with, in some cases, higher performance. Now, that hasn't been the case over the last 5 years. The S&P 500 has been on a tear.
Yeah.
It's been largely concentrated into what they call the
It's like,
Magnificent Seven.
I was about to say, 7 stocks.
So, but there was, I was listening to something this morning. In the 1970s, there was something called the Nifty 50. And they said, these are the only stocks that you'll ever have to buy. And one of those stocks, Eric, was Polaroid,
Yeah.
right? So
That would have been good up until they made a slight hiccup.
yeah,
Well, they were along the same lines as who's the classic camera company?
Kodak.
Kodak.
hmm
Weren't they? They were similar, right?
They were a chemical company.
Okay.
Kodak, I believe Eastman Kodak was a chemical company as well.
Yeah.
But
They didn't want to go digital.
no, it was also, I mean, think about this. I just saw a red box. I thought they were all gone, but I
Yeah.
literally just saw one at a Walgreens.
So apparently so I watched a YouTube video about Redbox and the downfall of it. Apparently, in rural communities, it still kills. But majority of them have been taken
Probably in
out.
places where they don't have very fast Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, very fast internet.
Well, it's just so we have some
Or they're slow to adopt.
they're slow to adopt. They don't use the internet as much just to begin with. Like we have a couple clients that we work in, like we're running ads in like rural areas. Now, realistically, we look at numbers, we're like, okay, the population says we should be doing better than we are, but the bottom line is some of these people in rural Springfield, Columbia, Jefferson City, just strictly don't go to Google to look for that type of stuff.
Right.
They aren't. They see a billboard or whatever, they're listening to the radio, well, they ask their buddy. So
That's probably the biggest one.
Mhm. So it's interesting how it works depending on where you're at.
You asked about the 401k thing, though.
Yeah.
So I always tell people I like humor sticks, and I'll say corny, stupid jokes. And I'll tell people, what's the greatest nation in the world? And people will throw stuff out, and I say, no, that's close, but the greatest nation is donation.
Mm.
So if your employer is giving you, if you put in 3% and they're giving you 3%, that's a 100% rate of return.
Yeah.
It was like, you should be doing that. There's
Yeah.
no reason why you shouldn't. Unless you're just broke, you should absolutely be doing that. But as far as doing it on your own versus in a 401k, well, the issue might be, let's say you're a person, let's be ridiculous to prove a
Well,
point.
401k, right? You get penalized if you take it out before you're 65.
59.5.
59.5. Got
Yeah.
it.
So, but here's the thing. Let's be ridiculous to prove a point. Let's
Yeah.
say that you're making $1 million per year.
Mhm.
Well, the most that you can put into an IRA might be somewhere around $7,000 to $8,000, depending upon which year you're in. I think next year it might go up to $8,000 for certain people. I don't think those numbers have been released
Does it
yet.
make sense for an average person to max out a Roth every year if they can?
Taxation wise, yeah. I mean, why? I mean,
So let's just say I have 5,000 every single year. That goes
5,000 what?
dollars.
That goes into
Whatever.
right.
Let's just say, because I would think, let's just say the average person listening right now is making like 50, 60 grand. Let's
If
just say
somebody's
that.
making $50,000 or $60,000,
Yeah.
here's the issue. Number one, I tell clients, I'll always tell you when something's a fact, when something's a theory, and when something's my opinion.
Mhm.
Okay. Here's the fact. I can't answer your question.
Yeah.
And the reason I can't answer your question, and I can't say definitively, you need to do a Roth,
Sure.
is because I can't look into the future and I do not know what tax rates will be.
Mhm.
So we have to go on the theory that we believe that people who are making $50,000 per year are going to continue to be in a low tax bracket. So that's what you're working with.
Right.
Now, if you have a person, for example, who's making, let's like again being ridiculous to prove a point. Let's say somebody's making $1 million a year. There's a loophole, if you will, to where a person could put money in certain cases into a traditional IRA and then immediately convert it into a Roth IRA, because if you make $1 million a year, you can't put money into a Roth IRA, but you can do what they call the word on the street
Yeah.
is it's called a backdoor Roth conversion. Now, as I will say it before, make sure you talk to your accountant because I certainly don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But
This sounds like something that can lend us into trouble down the road, like synthetic, you know.
would be Roth conversions?
It's just it's not like I get it makes sense for that individual, I guess, but why is it legal?
Oh, you're saying to the government?
Why is it legal? Because this is a question I was going to ask.
Ask away, Mr. Brown.
I was literally going to where's my specific question? How did I have it labeled? So, is there essentially when you reach X amount of money that are not available for average investors, is there opportunities that open up once you hit $1 million,
Yes.
$5 million? What are those?
So depending upon it, so the IRS wants to give tax advantages to people on the lower income and the higher income, depending upon what you're doing. So let's start with the higher. So if you're a business owner, why do they want to give you tax breaks? Because if you are creating jobs,
Employees,
your
right?
employees, you're
Yeah.
helping other individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they might say, hey, if you own real estate, you can deduct this amount. Or if you own a company, you can deduct that amount. And they'll incentivize you through the tax code to grow your business. That's what, in theory, what's happening. Now, for an individual, they'll say, look, if an individual is making $500,000 a year, we don't want to give them any more tax advantage because they make quote unquote too much money. So there's what are called phase outs. And those phase outs, I think for a married couple right now, I think it's somewhere around $215,000, $220,000 that if you make more than that, you can't just directly put money into a Roth IRA. But you could make $10 million a year and put money into a Roth 401k, to answer your question from earlier.
Okay. I didn't even know that was a thing.
So as far as limits to things, people who are quote unquote making more money, well, you have what are called accredited investors.
Yes.
And so an accredited investor.
I remember the Big Short scene. Remember they walk into, I think, Goldman Sachs, and he's like, well, do you have, what was it? I forget the number. He's like $100 million. And he's like, we got 10.
Right.
And he's like, or no, it was like $1 billion. It was like 1.2 billion.
Was this the scene in the lobby?
Yes.
Yes.
It was actually like 1.2 billion to get whatever they needed.
You're like, we got some Scoopy tokens.
Yeah. He's like, oh, we got 10 million, but I grew it from 100,000. He's like, well, come back once you have like 99% more or whatever it was. But that was a funny scene.
So the government says that if you are worth X amount of dollars, and I believe the number right now is $1 million. So if you're worth more than $1 million, and I believe it's $300,000, don't quote me on that. I'm very close if I'm not right on the money. If you're earning more than $300,000 or you're worth more than $1 million outside of the value of your home, so your home can't count, your primary residence can't count in that accreditation. Then there's some companies that will say, no, we know that by law you're accredited, but we won't work with you until you have double that or something along those lines. And think about this. If you were a bond trader and you could pick up the phone and you could sell $100 million of bonds to American funds, or you could break it up and sell it to 1,000 different mom and pop. Well, what you want to do more than likely is probably pick up the phone and just do it all in one fell swoop to American funds, because now that's off your desk.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that maybe overall you as that bond trader, you've made less money, but now you're on to the next thing. And now you as American funds, you're saying by the fact that we have billions and billions of billions of dollars, we have the ability to have the first bite at that apple. And so the more money you have, the first bite of the apple, you're closer to the first bite of the apple in that line.
Makes sense. Okay. So have you seen the news about Southwest?
Which news about the seats? How?
No, the activist takeover.
I have not seen that yet. I have seen about the seats, and this is something that's interesting. What they've said is that I think it's by 2026, 2025, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
They're switching
Yeah.
to the normal model. And so people either love it or hate it.
I don't understand. Elliott Investment Management.
Mhm.
They're essentially, I think they own like 10.
Are they trying to
10
force a seat on the board?
He's like, he's actively taking over Southwest right now.
Trying
to.
Yes.
And obviously the stock has gone down pretty significantly over the last couple of years when Southwest was like the golden child for 25 years.
They were.
Like they were in business schools, they were studied
Mhm.
as like the company to look at. And now let's just look at the stock.
I think one of the things I remember hearing was that one of the things that did Southwest in is that their
Lost
infrastructure
50% since April 2021.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Their infrastructure, like their computer infrastructure,
Yep.
they didn't dump in the amount of money that they needed to dump to keep it current. Whereas other companies were doing that, and eventually they have great service. Like everybody loves that. Like when you go on Southwest, you get the comedy routine in the beginning. People love that.
I don't, but sure.
But
I'm like, move along.
you're like, I just want to get to San
Yeah,
Francisco.
I'm just trying to go somewhere. I don't
Right.
need your joke. But that also goes to show who's flying Southwest. People like that like that. That's
I like Delta myself.
well, Southwest is going the way of being as expensive as Delta. So it's like at the reason people used to fly Southwest
They were the
is
low price provider.
2 free bags. That
Yeah.
and 2 free bags. It's like, just get me on the plane. I don't care where I sit. Just get me on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're going to go the route of having these seats, they're arguably almost as expensive as a lot of Delta
Oh, no,
or
they-
United flights now too.
Absolutely. I've seen it in multiple occasions where, so I go skiing each
Yeah.
year, and I go to Salt Lake City,
Mhm.
and
You can't fly Southwest one way there.
no, well, number one, you can't fly Southwest one way.
I will. That's actually why I didn't go to Salt Lake City last year.
You can fly Delta one way.
I know.
I
It
mean,
was expensive though when I looked.
It depends on what
I
time
was
of the
last
year.
minute.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
But the issue with it was that a lot of times, and I've looked at the price comparison between Southwest and Delta, and Delta was, and a lot of times, less expensive and
Direct.
no layovers.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, and you've got TVs in the back, and your seats are nice.
Delta seats are nicer for sure.
So
I
flew
flew Delta down to Cancun and it was wonderful. And then flew Southwest back and it was a nightmare. But I will never on this last flight back from Cancun, we for some reason I didn't book the direct flight from Cancun because I'm an idiot and I was coordinating with a bunch of other people and I didn't take charge. So I relied on someone else, made a bad decision, and then just bought a ticket on nightmare. And we were flying to Orlando. Orlando had a huge storm, landed
Mhm.
at Fort Myers. Since we were coming from Mexico, Fort Myers didn't have customs there, so we had to sit there for like 2 hours, waited for them to fill up enough gas for us then to go to Orlando, then got off at Orlando, and then got a connecting flight to St. Louis. But I'm like, I don't care if a ticket's like $100 or $200 more. I'm spending that to not have a layover. It's worth it. I hate it. I can't do it.
There's one place I don't like having layovers, and that's Atlanta.
That's yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's too busy.
Yeah. Well, I do like Denver layover because I like Roots,
What do you mean?
the restaurant bar.
Oh, okay.
I just always have super interesting conversations
You
there.
ever look at the floor of Denver International Airport?
Yeah.
They got all those weird
Yeah.
things, and then they got it was like did you ever see? They may have taken it down, but they had it looked like a Nazi stormtrooper, like with a gas mask and like people. It almost looked
Oh,
like
they
an
had some weird they had some weird stuff.
Armageddon. It looked like an Armageddon scene. I'm like, this is
Remember there was
not
a conspiracy
Of course
behind the
there
Denver
was.
airport
right.
and it being connected directly to what's the Cheyenne Mountain or what's the mountain complex right there in Springs, Colorado Springs.
Do not know. Well, the airport,
let's see.
not the airport. The Air Force is there.
Cheyenne Mountain Complex.
Yeah. All I know
Space Force installation.
all I
Let's
know
go, baby.
is those murals are weird.
Yeah. They are definitely weird. That's Denver Airport murals. But I heard now that you can actually fly pretty affordably into Steamboat now on Southwest.
Now you can fly. That's one thing I will say is you
Because
can
the
fly
drive from
cheap.
Denver to Steamboat's, it's not awful, but Highway 70 through the pass is like if you're
That's why
don't
I don't-
travel on Friday and don't travel on Sunday.
That's why I don't ski in Colorado. That's why I ski in Utah.
Well, there's no traffic there getting back? I mean, it's right there, right? It's 45 minutes.
Right there.
Yeah.
It's right there.
I've still never skied in Salt Lake City.
So I'll traditionally, what I'll do is I'll fly there. You get there around 9:00 in the morning. You can then go pick it. So I could buy my own skis, but then you got the hassle of like bringing them with you. And
Buy
so,
your own boots, rent skis.
So I'll do the demos.
Yeah.
So I'll get the new skis,
Mhm.
and there's a place called Ski and See that I go there all the time. It's like $45 a day for demos, boots,
You
poles.
gotta buy your own boots.
Yes, I do. I haven't done that yet, but I do need to get my own boots.
When you're out there next, find a boot fitter. Go like
What about the boot barn?
I was when I was in Colorado last year, I was going to buy a pair of ski boots, but I didn't have enough time, and also my ankle is still like tore up.
Swollen?
So I want to make sure my
If
well,
it's
I
right.
might have to get surgery on it. I sprained
know a
it.
guy.
I sprained it a long time ago, and this trip in Colorado, it's hurt pretty much every day since I got back.
We also the thing with Utah, go up to there's a little town in the middle of this valley called Eden, Utah. I believe that's where the Olympic Village was for all the skiing events.
Okay.
And there's two different resorts there. One's called Snow Base and the other's called Powder Mountain. And we'll usually go there. Love it. Absolutely love it. A lot of people like, what's the big place that people go out there?
Jackson Hole.
No. In Salt Lake, where Sundance Film Festival is.
Oh,
Park City.
Yeah, Park City.
So people, they love Park City.
They didn't have snow for a couple years. Last year they had a lot, but they didn't have snow for a couple years.
I don't like it
They're
because
lower elevation.
they are. I'm not a Park City guy because I'm not there to like go down the mountain
Party.
and drink a beer.
Yeah.
Or I had a friend of mine, he said that he knew somebody who managed Deer Valley, which is the most expensive one out there. And he said the average ticket or the average person goes down 2.5 times. So what are they doing? They're going down 2.5 times, and then they're going to get hot cocoa and sit by the fire. It's like, I want to go there and I want to ski for 7 hours. And that's why I love it. But anyway.
No, so I ski until I'm dead every day. And then
I love that.
And then I have a beer at the very end.
Love it.
I usually try and get first line.
Mhm.
I'm up early. It's like the one time I look forward to getting up early is when I'm
Have
skiing.
you ever been first?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Literally, yeah. Last year when I went, 2 years ago, we stayed in this resort that had on Vail on the far right side of the mountain, and we had our own thing. Open at 8:30. I was in line before 8:30, and I was like, straight up. Have to, because you get the first runs as long as
They're crisp.
if they got some nice snow,
Right.
it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the back half of the day is when the mountain turns
It's all
to shit.
skied out
Yeah.
and lumpy.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
done by like 3:00.
It's pretty lumpy by 3.
Yeah, yeah,
It's probably pretty lumpy by noon.
yes. Then I'm done. All right. Got anything else before we get out of here?
Is there anything else that any crazy things that you wanted to cover before we go?
No. Just that McKinsey and Company story I found was interesting, that private equity is slowly trying to make its way into the life insurance game.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the whole thing with those private equity can be good, can be bad, depends upon what they're actually doing. If the consolidation is good for the consumer, but here's the thing:
It's usually not.
typically speaking, what happens in our industry, it is super regulated. It is extremely regulated. I was telling somebody the other day that when I started, my very first interview was December of 1999. And I remember the process of opening a mutual fund IRA was quite literally a 4-page application. Now, if you wanted to do that exact same thing, Eric, it might be an inch of paperwork. And that's because you had 9/11, then you had 2008, then you had Dodd-Frank, I believe, then you
Yeah.
had 2015-ish, somewhere around there, 2016, best interest. And so they just do more and more and more and more and more. And so I look, I'm not a prognosticator by any sense of this imagination, but I think it will be difficult for them to consolidate that industry like they've done other industries just because it's so heavily regulated.
We don't want that to happen anyways,
Probably not.
especially consumers. Now, I'm sure the executives at those companies getting bought out by private
Oh, they get a
equity,
big payout. Yeah.
massive amount of
Well,
money.
it just they're not. Well, also, what you have to take into consideration those three companies that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
4 of them, but 3 of them are still private. So Mass Mutual, Northwestern Mutual, New York Life, they're all still private companies. Whereas a company like John Hancock is now publicly traded. A company like Prudential is publicly traded. It's much easier for those publicly traded companies because if you're a private company, the board and the shareholders, to some degree, have to say, "Yeah, we're okay with that."
Yeah.
You want to hear a dad joke before we go?
What's your dad joke?
Eric, do you remember when you were a kid
Yes.
and you had to you were studying dinosaurs?
Yes.
And what were the dinosaurs that ate meat? What were they called?
Carnivore,
And what were the ones that ate plants called?
herbivore.
So the herbivores were the most docile ones, right?
Yes.
And
Now plants are apparently alive, so maybe not.
okay. But for this joke.
Yes.
And then you had the most aggressive,
Yeah.
obviously, were the
Carnivore,
carnivores,
yeah.
right? But Mr. Brown, do you know what the most polite dinosaurs are?
No, I don't.
Those would be the porfivores.
And on that note, that is all the time we have for today. Aaron Bockman, thank you. If people want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
You can see if you my website's currently under construction. I'll have it go live probably in about another month. I just did a whole complete overhaul of it, but it's customwellsolutions.net, not .com. I didn't want to have to pay the people. It was a whole stance that I took like 10 years ago. And I was like, I'm not paying you $2,500 just for those 3 letters because somebody was squatting on it.
Yeah.
And now I was like, you're an idiot. You should have done that.
Yeah.
But love that you agree with me.
I do agree. .net's tough.
.net is tough.
That's
CustomWellSolutions.net. Also, the SynergyWellSolutions.com, 314-548-4009. Those are my contacts.
Well, it's been a pleasure. As always, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us. Shout out real quick, Half Coast Studios. Thank you for taking care of us as always. If you're looking to record a podcast here in St. Louis or just have someone take care of the editing and distribution, they can take care of you guys here. Go to halfcoaststudios.com. Also, best damn marketing company on the planet, Vi Media. You'll get the privilege of talking to me. You can reach out to me personally, Eric Kempf Brown, across the board, or go to vi.media. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, St. Louis podcast listeners. We've got some exciting news from our friends over at Farmers Insurance of St. Louis, led by the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Lee of Farmers Insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for a job or to own your own business under a brand that everyone and their cousin is familiar with, Mark Lee with Farmers Insurance of St. Louis is recruiting insurance agency owners here in St. Louis for their Farmers Insurance Mentorship Program.
And as many of you are aware, Garrett and I have owned quite a few successful and award-winning businesses over the years. And in a past life, one of those was a farmers insurance agency out of Chesterfield, Missouri.
Eric and I know firsthand how hard it is to start a business under a brand that no one has heard of and convince consumers and businesses to trust that you're an authority figure in your industry.
And as many of you know, we own an award-winning marketing firm, Vi Media, the one that Garrett was just discussing. And building that company's reputation literally took years. We're still building it to this day, and it's been 8 years in the making. However, with the Trusted Farmers Insurance Agency name on the building, we got started when we started our Farmers Insurance Agency. The trust was already built and has been for 96 years.
And if you can't do math, that means Farmers Insurance has been around since 1928. Luckily, you don't need to be a human calculator to get rich as an owner of your very own Farmers Insurance Agency.
Nope. All you have to do is reach out to the one and only Mark Lee, the leader of Farmers Insurance in the greater St. Louis metropolitan area.
That's right. So ensure he continues to sponsor our show and your favorite podcast, the St. Louis podcast, by quitting your job today and calling Mark Lee. I wouldn't even wait for him to answer your call. Call your boss now, quit, and become your very own business owner.
Visit insurancecareerstl.com. That is insurancecareerstl.com. Should we spell it out?
Yes. It would
INSURANCE, career, CAREER, STL.com, insurancecareerstl.com. Go there now. Back to the podcast.
And wait, insurancecareerstl.com.
Back to the podcast.